Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. Today's episode is a special guest episode. Well, it's a special episode because we have a guest, and the guest is very special. All of our guests are very special. Anyway, let me get to it. So our guest today is a guy named Howard Kingston. Howard Kingston is a digital marketing expert, and he's also a personal friend of mine. So Howard and I are part of a mastermind group of business owners. And I've gotten to know Howard over the last couple of years in the times that we spent together, getting together in person every few months. And the man just knows his stuff. He's based out in the UK. He's Irish, Irish descent. So when you hear the episode begin, you'll notice the Irish accent. And the topics that we covered today was all around growth marketing and setting up your growth marketing strategy the right way. So let me just talk a little bit about some of the specific topics that he and I covered in our conversation today. And that will help set the framework of what to listen to and how you can start applying a lot of what Howard and I talked about through today's conversation. So the first thing that we talked about, the two main areas that we talked about at the top of our conversation was, what are the two biggest mistakes that startups tend to make whenever they're launching or engaging with their marketing program? And so we talked about the critical importance of having objectives and metrics around your marketing program. And then secondly, how important it is to focus on a niche. And so we dove into a lot of detail around just those two areas, specifically looking at some example metrics around things like break-even point and how to use public relations, PR firms the right way, and setting up very, very strict KPIs, both with your PR firm as well as any other marketing channel or marketing programs, making sure that whatever outcome that you're driving towards is in fact getting achieved. So that was one thing we talked about. And then the second thing we talked about is the number of different channels and how do you do channel selection, and also how to deal with what he called channel bias. So you have to tune in to listen more about channel bias. So that was all around having metrics and objectives for your marketing programs. Secondly, when we talked about niche, or shared his personal experience doing what he called burning rubber. So early on, a couple of years ago, when he was selling his product that he had started years ago, he talked about how he was going around to lots and lots and lots of digital agencies all across London, and he called it burning rubber. And it was finally where he was able to identify a very specific type of agency and a specific buyer within that agency that he was able to accelerate his product sales. And so this notion of getting really, really clear on a niche and how critical it is and how you can go about doing that yourself with your marketing and with your sales campaigns. From there, we transition into his 3-step process for implementing a marketing program. So the 3 steps that we talked about are acquire, productivity, activating your buyers, and then acceleration. And so we dove into, in the acquire stage, we talked about what he called his bullseye framework and his ICE, impact, confidence, ease. How do you basically build a list of potential marketing activities and then narrow it down even more until you really, really focus on just a couple of key channels that are going to get you the results that you need. So that's all about the acquire piece. On the activate piece, we talked about conversions and getting people to return and the fundamental process, the buying process that your leads and your marketing generated leads are going to have to go through in order to get comfortable with buying your product. And then finally, we talked about acceleration. How do you go really fast? How do you experiment with marketing channels so you're not stuck in one channel too long and you're not hoping that something will change when in fact it won't? So we covered a lot of ground over the last hour or so. I'm very, very grateful for Howard's time. He was dialing in from London, which was late in the day for him, early in the morning, early for us here on the West Coast. Howard's is somebody I've been looking to have on the show for several months now. And we've had a hard time connecting on times because he does a lot of traveling, not just in Europe, but he travels internationally to deliver his marketing programs and his Growth Velocity Academy. So he's a hard man to track down. And even as a personal friend, it took me a while to get him on the show. And so I'm very grateful to have him. And I think you're going to be really, really excited to listen to this episode because we got really tactical with what you should be doing with your top of funnel marketing activities to generate the right leads for your startup. And most importantly, he gave you some really clear frameworks that you can start to put to action right away with your company. So as always, if you're listening to the show, if you're a repeat offender and you've listened to this episode and you've listened to past episodes, it tells me you're probably digging the content here. So I would really, really appreciate it. Maybe if you just take a moment, head over to iTunes or SoundCloud or Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Please leave us a review. Let other people know the effort that we put into bringing you great guests and really great content that you can take action on right away. So leave us a review. Tell us how we're doing. Make a suggestion, because we do take that very, very, very seriously. Nothing jazzes us more than getting information and feedback from the listening audience to know exactly where we need to take the show to help you get the most out of what we're doing and help us make the impact that we want to make. So we'd love for you to do that. Second thing is, one of the things I want to do, of course, is impact as many people as I can. And one of the easiest ways for me to help you, if you're listening, is I'd love to give you a free copy of one of my books called Startup Selling. So Startup Selling, How to Sell if you really, really have to and don't know how. If you go to startupselling.co, that's startupselling.co, you can go over there, request a totally free copy. We're going to email you a PDF. It's not, hey, it's free, but you have to pay for shipping. It's a totally free copy of the book. We'd love to send that to you and have you share it with the people around you, people on your sales team, other co-founders that you have on your team, other founders at other companies, other VPs of sales at other companies, if you're listening in. So would love to get that book out to as many people as possible. So those are my two asks for you. Leave a review and download a copy of the book and share it with as many people as you can so we can get the word out and I can help as many people as possible. So I think that's it for the introduction. Let's get over to the conversation with Howard Kingston. Howard, hey.
Scott in the house. How you doing, dude?
Hey, how are you, man? It's so good to talk to you and see you here.
I'm awesome. How's it going?
I have no doubt you're awesome. I've got lots of questions for you about stuff that you've been doing, not just with work, but I'll get to those in a moment. So I wanted to just dive right in. So you're the founder of a company called Escape Velocity, and that's focused on helping marketing leaders fundamentally, change and shift how they're doing their marketing. On your website, in fact, there's what's called the Growth Toolkit, which I downloaded, and I've been looking at this thing. And I'm going to just tell people listening right now, even if you don't listen to another minute of this episode, just go to howardkingston.com and download the Growth Toolkit, because this thing is freaking awesome. I'll just leave that as a teaser. We can talk more about that later on. So as a digital marketer, your job is to help people build out marketing systems that help them grow and scale and ultimately get the message out about what their company does and how their company changes the world around them. Is that a fair assessment?
Cool, dude. Yeah, bang on.
Yeah. And so before you founded your company, Escape Velocity, you also founded a company called Adludio, and that was VC backed. It was it's a mobile advertising platform used by Nike, Unilever, Sony, and hundreds of Fortune 500 brands. So when it comes to both marketing and tech, you're a man that knows this stuff. So I'm going to just stop right there, and you let me know what I missed that's really important.
Dude, no, that's it. So Escape Velocity is one of my programs. My academy is Velocity Academy. And yeah, I just work with founders and entrepreneurs who want to scale faster, but also people that want to get into growth hacking and growth marketing, get their first job in digital marketing as well. So I kind of got two groups that I help with. Yeah.
Cool. Man, I love that. And what time is it and where are you right now?
It is 6:03 p.m. in London, and it's kind of cool. It started snowing today for the first day.
Oh, okay.
My accent's Irish, obviously, but
maybe not obviously to some people.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, my accent's Irish, but I'm here in central London in the UK, because I know there's a London in Canada as well.
Okay, cool. So I've got a ton of questions on the marketing side of things. Before we do that, I had to ask you something, because you and I are friends on Facebook, and we're also part of the same mastermind group. Tell me about this cold weather swimming that you do.
Yeah, dude. So living in Ireland, the Irish Sea is very, very cold. They definitely forgot to turn the heating on in it. Yeah, just whenever I'm home or when I'm anywhere, like I love running, just like you, Scott. I love running, exercising and stuff. So there's a beach really close to my family home in Ireland. I go running on the beach and I go straight in for a swim afterwards. Dude, it feels so good.
Yeah, but the water, I mean, the water has to be, like, in Fahrenheit, it's got to be in the low 50s and high 40s even.
I don't know what that is, but because we're in Celsius,
Yeah.
but it's all I know is it's freaking cold. But you feel
Yeah.
great after it. I remember listening. I think it was like whenever I get into the water, remember listening to, there was a Tony Robbins interview. I don't know, some podcast he was on, maybe Tim Ferriss. He talks about how he has a cold shower every day.
Yeah.
And just the way he says it, Tony Robbins' voice is like, he says, it makes me feel alive. And I just kind of replay that in my mind because I have a cold shower every morning. And that kind of also, and whenever I get into the cold shower or I get into the ice cold sea, I always kind of have Tony's voice going over in my mind, and it just gives me the courage. And I mean, you do feel great after it, but it's obviously hard getting in.
Yeah, man, that is hardcore. I've had some friends that swim the English Channel, and I know the channel is somewhere around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is cold. Believe me, that is cold. So cool, man. I wanted to ask you about that. I do the same. I do cold showers at night.
Oh, do you? Nice.
Yeah, after workouts. It helps me sleep better. Some science behind that somehow.
Is there?
And I also do ice baths sometimes. If I'm in a heavy training mode, I'll do get 20-pound blocks of ice and put them in the bathtub and sit there for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's kind of, I don't do it all the time.
15 minutes, really? Wow.
Yeah.
So a cold shower at night helps you sleep, does it?
That's some of the science, debatable. Something to do with your body temperature. And so if you do ice bath at night too, then sometimes it's supposed to help sleep. I don't know. I'll do that, and melatonin and magnesium, and lights off. I have a hard time getting to sleep at night. So I do I stack the odds in my favor to make sure.
Yeah. Good plan.
So cool. I just wanted to ask you about that before we got into all the great marketing stuff. So let's start maybe just from the top, and I'm going to ask a really broad question because I think it's an important way to begin the conversation when you're talking about growth hacking and marketing and those types of strategies. When you work with entrepreneurs and you work with tech companies and startups, what's the single biggest mistake that most of these companies make when they're pursuing their marketing programs?
Yeah, great question. I think there tends to be quite a few. Like, I'd say the single biggest mistake, and I see people make, because I work with a lot of accelerators. I'm sure you do too, Scott. And
sure.
Like speaking, when you kind of go into accelerators, and it's just like the really fundamental stuff that, you almost think, like, come on, guys, how do you not know this? It's the simple stuff like having a really clear objective of what they're trying to do, what a clear goal is that they're trying to hit over the next kind of 90 days, 12 months. That almost is like, that's one of the most single things. And particularly, whether you're bootstrapping or you're VC backed, if you're looking to raise investment, right? Everyone has a target that they're trying to hit. And if you're a VC-backed startup or wanting to raise your first round, like, there is a metric that you're trying to hit to impress your investor. And most people don't know what that is. They just are trying to move forward, as opposed to, like, one thing I always did when I was raising money in the past, I'd go out and speak to a couple of investors, get a bit of a sense of where I need to get to, kind of from a metrics growth, whether user acquisition, whatever, and then kind of reverse engineer where I need to get to hit that goal. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is just have a really, like, I'm sure you see this as well, Scott, like, early stage businesses particularly are trying to market to everybody, as opposed to get really dialed into knowing who their customer is and really kind of getting under the skin who that is. Now, those two things may sound sometimes obvious, but at the same time, 99% of the time, people aren't doing it. So, and that holds them back.
That's really great. So I'm going to dive in a little bit into the metrics or the objectives that you mentioned, or like the lack of objective. So like, I'll see this if I'm on LinkedIn. I'll see, founders putting posts out or companies putting posts out, or you see Facebook ads. So is what you're saying that, companies have this tendency, like, we have to do marketing. And so a marketing program includes LinkedIn post and email campaign and Facebook stuff. And therefore, if we do those things, we're doing marketing, as opposed to, as you mentioned, starting with, like, what is the end goal and working backwards. Is that the way to think about it?
Totally. I think, like, what I really like to convey onto anybody we work with is, I think marketing can get sometimes a bit of a bad rep as from, like, there's a lot of people in the world, social media and like just doing stuff and making noise as opposed to driving a specific result. Marketing is incredibly powerful when you can drive a result you're trying to get, as opposed to, I think too many people just do stuff and, you can keep busy all day when it comes to marketing, right? There's enough kind of social media channels and stuff to keep you busy all day, but does it actually drive the key results that you're trying to get? So that's the key thing to remember.
Okay. Can you think of like a really specific example of a key result or an objective that, maybe it's a client that you helped with when they came to you, they're like, oh, we're doing all this stuff as part of our marketing program. And then you kind of reverse that and say, okay, well, why are we doing all this? What is the objective? Could you give us an example of what like a really specific objective would be and how perhaps maybe you pulled out certain strategies like, okay, you don't need to be doing Facebook ads or you don't have to be doing Instagram stuff, just as sort of addition by subtraction?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a specific example now off the top of my head, but just for whatever reason, the first one that pops into my head is one client we launched last summer in London was the world's a bit of a random one. Normally I work with tech and software businesses, but this one was the world's biggest zip line, right? So the things that you zip along, it's the world's biggest zip line and launched here in London. So you could say it's fast moving startup as opposed to fast growing startup. But anyway, so the guy had launched, well, he hadn't launched yet. He was just about to launch and he had like 10 weeks to sell as many tickets as he could because it was kind of like a seasonal thing. So I think the first thing that we went in was really kind of breaking down. You would kind of expect maybe, people in the business, running the business to know what their break-even points and all this kind of stuff is. But, I don't think you can, my experience is that most people don't know that. So we really spent a lot of time trying to break down, how many tickets needed to be sold for us to reach break-even. And the way I always like to approach it is, first of all, I find out what that break-even point is. And then I will break down all the different channels on our disposal so we can really almost guarantee a success because we know we have X amount of marketing budget and breaks down by channel what we estimate our results to be. So when you break it down in that way, you can get very confident about your results. In this case, it was very much driven on ticket sales. And I think our break-even point was about like 20,000 ticket sales or something. And we broke down every single channel we had. So we knew that it was very highly probable we'd hit break-even. And then you can always kind of hope for the upside. And I think we kind of sold, we went, 30,000 tickets in 10 weeks, went over $1 million in sales, and the dude was super happy. But it was all about, we spent quite a bit of time in the first week working together, really driving in what that end goal was going to be. If that answers the question, I know that's a high level metric, but
no, it's really good. I'll dive into some more details in a moment. And I think as I was listening about that, whether it's you're selling tickets or if it's enterprise software, it's like, okay, how many leads am I generating from this marketing activity, or how many meetings am I booking? People that might want to see a product demo, for example, or people that request product demo. I think like not knowing that funnel from top, very top in the marketing sense, like how many people do we have to get into a request the demo, and then bottom below that, right? Okay, well, just because 100 people requested a demo doesn't mean we're going to make 100 sales. So knowing the bottom of the funnel and those metrics, and even saying, okay, well, if we need to drive an additional 10K in revenue, monthly recurring revenue this month, then working up from there and just knowing every key conversion point, because I suspect there might have been some channels, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, are there certain channels that were either surprisingly good channels for you, or ones that maybe your initial hypothesis was like, wow, if we advertise here or we run this kind of marketing program in that channel, we should get a certain percentage of ticket sales? Were there any that either outperformed or underperformed based on what you went into?
Yeah, totally. So in this specific case, I would say we hit our break-even target within like the first 3 weeks of launching, and that's because PR. One of the channels we were using was PR. PR can be good when you have something which is genuinely newsworthy, and the world's biggest, fastest zip line right beside Big Ben in London is fairly newsworthy, right? And we got some great photos that got onto pretty much every newspaper. So we sold out, I'd say 70% of our capacity in the first 2 weeks purely through like maybe 2 or 3 press releases. So that massively skewed the results. And
did you expect that? I mean, you're going in there as a marketing expert and saying, well, geez, this thing is newsworthy. We're going to run some PR. That's going to probably generate some activity. So we're going to add that to the portfolio of marketing stuff. It sounds like, based on your expression, that it way outperformed what you expected.
Well, here's the thing with PR. You can't guarantee it, but you can still negate the downside with PR. Because here's the thing with PR, we all know it, right? If it hits, it can be massive, or you can just, we've all been frustrated with PR too in our lives, and we've sacked PR agencies and all this kind of stuff, right? So I've had some great experiences over the years, and I've also had some really frustrating experiences. And I think with everything, I think the focus is to really negate the downside. So we brought on a PR agency who had all, the reason you bring on a PR agency rather than in-house is if you have to do something at speed. We didn't have a long run-up time to make our own contacts. So we brought in a PR agency who had all the contacts. And the key thing there is to negate the downside, we put in some really strict KPIs, right? Key performance indicators for the PR agency. So if they didn't hit at X number of pieces of content, in the devil's in the detail with this stuff, right? And this is where most people mess up with PR agencies. They keep it too broad. So I'll always put in a KPI of a number of pieces of content in certain and be very specific on the type of titles. I'd usually break it up into tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 1 might be a national broad newspaper in print, for example. Tier 2 might be like someone like TechCrunch. Tier 3 might be someone else, more long tail. Make them agree to it up front, because it's always when they're pitching to you, you have the biggest leverage. If you forget to put the KPI in, you put and you sign the contract, your negotiating power is gone, right? So it's always when you're negotiating with them. So I'll always do that. And kind of like another top tip I would give if you're hiring a PR agency, I would always without asking them for references, find out some of the people that they've worked with in the past, maybe from their website, and cold call founder. So I always do that. And in this specific case, I remember I was down between 2 people, and there was a brand which I knew the founder of on the other PR agency's website, and I called her and I asked, listen, what do you think of that person? She actually went, they were okay, but between ourselves, I wouldn't use them. And that clearly, so I went with the other guys and they smashed it. So yeah, so the devil's in the detail is when you're hiring PR agency, and then you're at least negating the downside, and then you open yourself up for some upside if it happens to go really, really well.
Yeah, there's a ton of lessons in there. I love, even just whether you're hiring a PR agency or your next sales rep, everybody asks for references, and I'm always going to give you the best ones. In fact, I personally, when I interview people, I don't even check references, because I know the references are going to give me are good ones. So we have all the other kinds of systems that we use to assess candidates before we even think about offering a position. But this idea of cold calling previous employers, because you see everybody's history on LinkedIn. And like you said, if they've got logos on their website, that we helped XYZ company, then from a CEO standpoint, that's a peer. It doesn't matter if the other company if you're a startup with 10 people and the company you're calling is a 10,000 person company, you're still a CEO, goddammit, right? So pick up the phone, hey, I'm a CEO of this company, and I want to ask about this PR firm. So just act the role. And not to mention the networking out of it.
And chances are their email address is firstname@domain.com. So you can just email them, and a founder will talk to a founder, or a CEO will talk to a CEO one day.
Yeah, for sure. So yes, I love the cold call references, and I love the strict KPIs that you put in before the project, and then you have these off ramps that you're not exposed to a lot of time and money with that agency, and you can always shift tactics. So that's really cool. So the PR stuff worked really well, and it exceeded expectations. Were there certain channels that's going into this that you're like, okay, I think this one will work pretty well, or we should get X number of ticket sales, but then you launch that channel and you're like, whoa, this is not working out the way we thought?
I don't know in this case, my approach when I'm putting together a marketing plan. And I've just done I'll do it for my own business. I do it with every client we work with is we do a full traction channel review every single time. You know, the Gabriel Weinberg kind of process of going through.
Yeah, I know the co-author of that book. I don't know Gabriel Weinberg, but I know the book Traction.
Who's the other guy? He's a really young guy is the other guy, isn't he?
Yeah. No, his name escaped me. I haven't talked to him.
I've heard of him, but I don't know him. But yeah, no, I swear by that process of kind of going through the 19 traction channels and really looking at every single one, because, you know, one thing really learned is that most people typically have some kind of channel bias. Kind of go, oh, I know how to do Facebook ads, so I'm going to use Facebook ads, and then kind of missing some good opportunities. And in every single time I go through a traction channel review, you always come up with some killer, baller ideas. So highly recommend checking out that book, Traction, and following that process. That's something that we do every single time. So we went through that with that client. I do it with all my businesses, also for my own business, and I find it really, really useful.
Yeah, Justin Maris.
That's the co-author.
Yeah. So that was one of the things actually I noticed from your growth toolkit handout that the ebook that you've got. I think you mentioned those 19 channels in this ebook, don't you?
I might do.
Yeah.
Forget what I wrote in it.
I wrote that so long. You probably wrote this in your sleep. But so you mentioned something about channel bias, which I think is really important. I think as soon as you said channel bias, I almost I got a little bit, I got a little jump in my stomach, because I think as soon as you said it, I never knew this could be a thing. And then you said it, and I'm like, oh crap, I wonder if I have channel bias with what I do with my own business. Because, for example, we do a ton of stuff on LinkedIn because I like the platform. I've had a lot of success in the past there. It's a platform that I, like connecting with people in my market, and just sort of like a thing. I'm very comfortable with it. And I've always shied away from, say, doing Facebook ads, because I'm like, I'm on Facebook, but I'm not super groupy there and not a big thing. And I've had people say, oh, you should be doing Facebook ads. I don't want to do that. So the channel bias, I think, is really an important concept. And that's where having somebody like you, that you can be objective with somebody, sort of like hold me to the fire and say, okay, you might not like Facebook, but your audience is on Facebook, for example.
100%.
Yeah. And the same with conferences. I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I should be at conferences, and I'm going to go to conferences, and they spend a ton of money advertising and doing a booth and sponsoring, blah, blah, blah. But going back to the metrics, how many times I talk to founders all the time. It'd be great. You just spent $50,000 for travel, booth, sponsorship. What was your ROI on that? Oh, we got a lot of leads, and, we got 250 people that came by the booth, and, we're going to follow up with them. They can't even tell me any meetings they booked. I don't know. We're going to send an email in a week, and then we're going to book demos from there. I'm like, dude, really? That's how you're going to assess success? And so whether it's, a media channel or an in-person channel, I think having those KPIs and the ROI calculations is critical.
Yeah, totally. I think conferences is something which can be real. I think if anyone goes to a conference and hopes for serendipity, or it's just stuff happening, I think they're setting themselves up for failure. But I do think that you can get great results from conferences if you're, the person who does the best from conferences is the person that goes to the conference and their diary is already full before they set foot into the room. So really knowing who's there in advance, looking, scraping the list of all the speakers, reaching out to them in advance, having all the meetings booked in, and then going in. And that's where you can get good ROI from a conference, I think.
Yeah, no, totally agree. My goal whenever I was doing conferences was to go to the conference and never spend a minute in the booth and never spend a minute in the session. I just always wanted to be in the lobby or somewhere meeting with people. That was always my goal.
Totally.
So cool. So we talked about channels, channel bias, having metrics. That was also sort of the first of the two mistakes that you mentioned at the top. The second, when you started talking about, you talked about focusing on a niche. And this is something that, whether it's a zip line or enterprise software, I come across this all the time. You meet a startup founder and you say, tell me about your product or what kind of companies you serve. And they've got 3 customers and they tell you well, we solve this problem for hospitals, financial companies, and the telecommunications sector. You're like, all right, that's like the whole world, basically, which makes it impossible to sell, let alone market. So I'd love to hear you talk more about how do you get people to accept that narrowing down to a niche is better, because there's this sort of fear of missing out. I find people are like, I don't want to miss out on opportunities. Or we get introduced to people in fintech, even though we really want to focus on hospitals, and it could be a $50,000 deal. So whether it's on the sales side or the marketing side, it can feel constraining, and you feel like you could be missing out. So how do you help somebody who's listening to this say, no, it's actually better, much, much better. In fact, you have to focus on a niche. How do you communicate with your clients on that?
Yeah, I think like it's actually even more important. Like, listen, it's important for every type of business, particularly in the, if you're anyway in the B2B space. Like, I remember when we were launching Adludio, my advertising business, kind of maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, okay, you could say, okay, I was in the advertising space, so that is a niche or whatever part of the world you're in. But I was here in London. Yeah, exactly. I was here in London, and I just recently moved here, and I had never worked in advertising before. And I was like, okay, I've got this like new innovative type of like ad product. So I'm going to go and meet all the people in the advertising industry because they're going to want to buy it. So I went out and met all these people in agencies and brands. And you're in London, which alongside New York is probably the center of the advertising world. And, so I was meeting people from all the agencies. There's like so many different types of agencies, right? There's media, digital, social, creative agencies, all these types of agencies. Some of them have 10,000 people in them, right? And I was what you might call burning a lot of rubber, meeting all these people all the time. And people in the, Adland people are usually quite nice, and they always tell you how great your product is. But you know what? Like, I was exhausted after every week because I was full of meetings, hustling like crazy. I was I'd say hustling was one of my superpowers, but I wasn't getting any sales. Like, my conversion rate was 0. So after a couple of months, we kind of, took a step back. And when I analyzed it more, I saw that actually there was of all those type of agencies, only one type of agency could actually write me a check for that thing. And that was called a media agency in my case. And there was actually just one job title of a person who could purchase my thing, who could sign off on my ad product. And in my case, that was called an account director. So, if you really look at the way my approach changed after learning that piece of information, the following week is just really straightforward. What did I do? I opened up a spreadsheet. I went to LinkedIn. I put account director in media agency in London, and there's about 120 of them at the time in London. I just filled up my spreadsheet, got Email Hunter or the equivalent back then, filled up the email addresses and emailed. And the week after, I had fewer meetings, but they started to convert. That was a really dramatic shift of learning that we got from kind of going to market. Because sometimes you don't know, but it's just so important to know who that buyer is. So I think how I would try and, as opposed to I would tell them my story of that, but if I was trying to help someone with it, I would always go back to the goal they're trying to hit. Typically, particularly if you're a startup, and we're kind of talking to startups here, the goal, typically people are trying to get like maybe, it depends on the type of business you are and your price point, but maybe you're trying to get 50, 100, 200 customers a quarter. So you don't need everybody, right? Actually, if you're just super more focused, you're going to be able to get to 50 customers faster. So if people start saying to me, oh, but it could be that person, it's like, dude, how many do you need? You only need 50. And if you can convert 1 in 4, you only need a pot of 200 people. Isn't it going to be far easier to focus on a really tight group? And then, that other group, you can go to them after, next quarter. And then when people know it's only maybe 2 or 3 months away, so that they can go out to a wider group, they usually kind of are more accepting.
You're not telling them no, you're just saying not right now.
Yeah.
Sort of a big psychological trick. No, I think that you mentioned, getting that focus, and I want to ask you a question about, your experience identifying who that account director is. But first I wanted to mention about, this idea of conversion rates. Like if you say, look, you got to get 50 customers this quarter or even this year, if your conversion rates are 1 out of 4, that means 200 at the top of the funnel. Like I see this a lot, and you probably have seen this a lot when people bring you in, where they've built out email lists, or they've bought email lists, or they scraped email lists, and they got 10,000 people, and they're just blasting, this 8 or 10 email sequence that are just cookie cutter. They're repeats from other templates they've seen from other folks. And they're blasting out 1,000 emails a week. They're like, oh, we got 2 meetings. And they're like, that's our sales funnel. And they think like, I gotta send 1,000 emails to get 2 meetings. Like, well, no, like as a startup, your funnel should actually be pretty narrow. You shouldn't go so wide that the number you required so many inputs to get that output. Because if you're really clear on your message, and you're really clear on your niche, and you're clear on the problem you solve and who you're going after, the person who gets that email will be like, holy crap, that's me. So the conversion rate should be really high. And then down the road, you can worry about blasting 1,000 emails a week.
Totally.
Yeah. So for you, I'm kind of curious, because there could have been other variables as you're doing that analysis, right? You're going around talking to these different agencies. You mentioned there's different types of agencies. There's different titles of people. There could be certainly different sizes of agencies. How did you extract it down to it being a media agency and an account director as you were going through this burning rubber process to know that it actually was that person? Was it a light bulb moment, or is it more of a trial and error, and you kind of kept narrowing it down and chipping away?
Yeah, great question. So it was a combination of 2 things. First of all, it was trial and error, and me realizing, and we realizing that it wasn't working as is. Then coming out of the weeds a little bit, which can be hard when you're in mad hustle mode. And then, sometimes you have to be aware, sometimes you have to be aware you don't know it all, which is hard again for a startup founder sometimes. And thankfully we had some great advisors. So having an advisory board is something that I've always, recommend to companies I work with, but also I had always in my team, in my companies, I should say. So we had some industry advisors, and we were able to go out, and they were able to connect me with people in the industry to get some feedback on. And that was the process that I was able to narrow it down. People who had been there, done that, and sold a similar product into the market. That was how we were able to narrow it down further.
So they were able to help you focus in and say, look, like try these 3 types of agencies, or try these types of titles. So you weren't going across all agencies and all titles.
100%. Yeah. Cause I didn't even know like basic stuff. Now, if anyone's listening or who has been in the advertising world or ad tech world or any of that kind of stuff, they'd know this stuff. But like, as an outsider, you'd never know that a creative agency doesn't actually handle budget for buying some kind of an ad, right? All they do is do the creative side of things. So it's the media agency that actually makes the decision of where to spend the budget. I didn't know that. So, that was one of the things. And then when you're within the media agency, it's like, okay, who makes the decision on, what ad product to buy? And eventually I found out through speaking to people in a friendly way, as opposed to trying to pitch them. Because sometimes you have to ask for advice, and it's a different conversation. And I found out that, it was the account director. And that's when we were able to kind of really focus on that.
Okay. So now we've got our objectives and metrics. We've got a niche. Is there a process that you recommend or you bring people through? Or I'm sure you do. So maybe the question is, what is your process to say, okay, we've got these 2 kind of things figured out, and now we actually have to craft the message. We have to craft the strategy and launch it. Like, what is there like a 3-step thing that like everybody, once you've got these things figured out, that somebody listening is, okay, if I do this, this, and this, I'm on the right path?
Yeah, like the 3 kind of areas I always look at is they really got to get dialed in is being able to acquire someone predictably, knowing what the right channels are. Because really, if you have 2 or 3 channels, ideally 1 or 2, 3, doing all the channels at once is never going to work. So knowing the right channels that you can tap to acquire customers into the top of your funnel. Then the second kind of core area of focus is what's your conversion mechanism. So I always call it acquire, activate. How are you activating customers when they come into your funnel? And then accelerate is the final section. And acceleration is all about, even if you're able to acquire people at speed and activate them, unless you have a solid infrastructure of systems, team, etc., the wheels will come off the train. So you've got to get all of those three things firing at once. So acquire, activate, and accelerate are kind of the process.
Okay. And so you mentioned earlier about these 19 different channels that are mentioned in the book Traction. Like if somebody is just starting off, like the one or two or maybe three channels, do you find that those channels are somewhat interrelated, or they don't necessarily have to be? Like, as an example, I might think of like YouTube is a video channel, and then I could also be doing email campaigns, which they seem like completely unrelated. Or you could be doing YouTube and then posting those videos onto LinkedIn. So they're kind of somewhat related channels. I don't know if I'm thinking about that the right way, but how does somebody get dialed into those one or two channels and stay disciplined on knowing, like, again, the fear of missing out? I should be doing this. I could be doing that. Shiny red ball, chasing this next marketing channel. How do you keep people disciplined, and how do you help people choose the channels that they should be starting on?
Yeah. So when you're choosing your channels, and again, following the Traction channel review process, you kind of do a lot of brainstorming. And I think it's really important to kind of keep your brainstorming and creative process away from your prioritization. So when we're prioritizing, after we've done the initial 19 Traction channel brainstorm, we use something called the bullseye framework. So if you can imagine a dartboard or a bullseye, 3 circles, this is where you place your different channels. So the 19 different channels would include, say, Facebook advertising, Google ads, viral marketing, things like that. And after you've done a big brainstorm, you need to place them into this bullseye. So if you visualize the bullseye, and you're only allowed 3 marketing ideas in the center of the bullseye, right? And that's really effing hard when you've just spent 4 hours and you've got like 70 ideas on the wall. I did this actually last week, and it's all over the white. We've got this massive wall, which is a whiteboard. And you've got all of these ideas, and some of them are killer, some of them are awful, but that's all good. How we prioritize it, I usually, before we put them straight into the bullseye, I use a prioritization framework called ICE. And I'll put all the ideas into a spreadsheet. And the ICE framework stands for potential impact. So if this thing worked, how much of an impact could it be? 1 would be, only a little thing. 5 is like, oh my goodness, we could go viral here. C stands for confidence. How confident are you that this will work? So, sometimes you come up with an idea and you go, oh my goodness, that is definitely going to work. And then another idea might be, oh, that's a bit of, it might work, it might not. So 1 would be if you're not sure. 5 would be if you're super confident. And then E stands for ease. So, that scales from, do you need, for example, do you need to bring up, your whole tech team? Do they need to work on this for a week? That would be a 1 score of ease. Or a 5 score would be, hey, I'm just going to open up my laptop, fire off, a message, and it's done. So I usually do a quick ranking, and that allows you to bring the best ones up to the top, and then you place them into the bullseye, the center of the bullseye. And it's usually it's a good process going through that. And by the end of it, the ones that you have in the middle, you're super confident about. But, I would just say that it always depends. If you hear any marketing person like me or someone else saying, oh, you always have to use Facebook ads, or you always have to use LinkedIn, they're never right, because it always depends. The customer, the type of product that you have and the price point, so many variables. So just no one size fits all. You need to go through the process yourself to come up with what's right for your customer and your product.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. I mean, we get this all the time with our coaching program too, where people are like, hey, tell me what lead gen strategy that I need to be using. Like, I don't know. We're going to find out though, because there's 5 or 6 different things we can test based on what you have to work with. And then from there, the data will tell us what to do. Because if I just go and say, oh, well, you should definitely be doing LinkedIn, or you should definitely do this, run this email campaign and you will get leads. I don't know. It may just not work in your industry, or may not work with the companies you're targeting.
100%. Like, the biggest question I get most is, what one growth hack should I do? right? Because I'm in marketing. I've done some growth hacking successfully in the past, and so therefore everyone just it always comes to me asking, like literally I got off a call about 2 weeks ago. The dude was like, "Oh, dude, I remember you talking about that thing that you did a few years ago, growth hacking that business. Like, what growth hack should I do now?" I was like, "Dude, like I don't even know what your business is. Anybody." And there's a lot of growth kind of people in inverted commas calling themselves growth hackers now that will just push one or two tactics onto people.
Right.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah, buy my system because when I ran this system, I got $500,000 in revenue.
Got worse than that. Or when I read about this person who used that tactic, it worked. It read for that. So therefore, I recommend that you should do it. I've never actually done it myself, but I've read it's good. Yeah, there's a lot of that out there.
Yeah, unfortunately. So cool. I love that on the acquire predictably. So the bullseye framework and then following the ICE framework. So then you said step number 2 is activate. So that sounded like the equivalent of like a call to action. So somebody, engages with the content or the channel, whatever that is, and you've got to convert them from viewing into whatever contact, email address, phone number, whatever. How do you think about, or not to give specific calls to action because I know it's different for every client, but what's a basic framework that people should be thinking of in order to get the conversion so that it's either getting not enough leads because maybe the barriers and the friction is perceived to be too high, or they're getting actually too many and they've got to filter through a bunch of really crappy leads. There's got to be that sweet spot. So what is a framework or two? Or
so when I think about activation, what I think about is how do you get people to convert? How do you get people coming back under retention? And then how do you get them to ask for referrals, particularly, with some kind of referral mechanism that you may have in a SaaS product or a app, for example. So, this is a tough one because it kind of really depends on whether you've got a sales team or whether you're a free to play app or, what that is. If it's really focusing on the sales thing, I think the first thing is to realize that you have realize that there's a process you have to bring people through. And that's, again, to you and I, and some people that follow you, that might sound obvious, but I think when most founders start off a business, it's not necessarily intuitive and it's not obvious that there's actually a sales process that you have to bring people through. Because I remember, I can say that because I remember I had a VC-backed startup. We just raised $1 million and I did not know this, right? And we were going out. I did not realize that, you have to break down the pipeline and you have to bring people in. There's different things you do at the different stages and it's very predictable. It's not just like this blob of activity where the salesperson talks to people and maybe a sale comes out the other end. So it's actually a very predictable process. So I think the number one thing is to be able to map out what that process is. And someone like yourself, is the best person to be able to help them with that, break down a sales process. And then it becomes very predictable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I love the fact that you put referral in there because it's not just convert and use again, but it's refer. Like I saw this I'm going to an event tomorrow night in San Francisco. There's a startup group out here called Modern Sales Pros, and they run these salons every couple of weeks. And one of the things that was really cool about this was it's a free ticket and you sign up for Eventbrite, you got an email that said, "Hey, we got your registration. Who are two or three other people in your network that we should invite to join us?" And I was like, that's so magical just to get great people at the event, but you could certainly adopt that even if somebody's downloading, like I mentioned, your growth toolkit download, somebody could easily say "Oh, thanks for downloading this. Oh, by the way, right now, can you think of 2 or 3 other people that you should forward this to?" I mean, it's an easy way to go viral. Even when people are first coming into the very top of your funnel, you could end up getting referrals because I might get this toolkit thing and go, "Wow, man, this is really good. I'm going to forward this over to all of my clients because they should all get a copy." And then all of a sudden, boom, just because you asked me to, now 20 startups are going to get a copy of this thing.
Oh, dude, it's so powerful when it works. I was lucky enough to launch with a couple of friends a gaming business a few years just before my advertising business. And we, using referrals and viral marketing, we launched the business, and within 18 months, we'd hit 20 million users. And that was purely, almost exclusively using viral marketing, invite, referrals, invite, things like that. So when it works, it really, really can work. I think, again, the biggest mistake people make when it comes to referrals is they just try one thing, and then and it might not work for them the very first time, and then they give up, So really, when it comes to, this is kind of touching back onto the growth hacking stuff I was talking a few minutes ago about, the real secret to growth hacking is, repeated experiments. Because if you just try something on the first week or the second week and it doesn't work and you give up, well, you're always going to be wondering, why did it not work for me? Because I remember when you could, inverted commas, say we growth hacked our gaming business, it was experiment number I think it was 36, about 4 months into the business. And we tried loads of stuff that hadn't been working, but then we brought in an invite friend pop-up, and we instantly went from 50,000 users to 350,000 users in 30 days, just from that one change. And you know what? If we had given up on experiment 30, that would never have happened. So it's really the secret is to make a backlog of ideas of how it might work. When is the best time to ask someone to refer a friend? What's the best incentive? There's loads of different variables there. It could be when someone just signs up. It could be after someone's bought the ticket, like you experienced. It could be the next day. There's a load of different times you can try it. And the reality is you need to, prioritize them, maybe using something like the ICE framework, and then just, go through them sequentially. And, if you do it, you will get results. Some of the stuff will take.
Yeah, it's like we've got a client right now he had a ton of success doing a monthly webinar. So they're in the mortgage fraud space, and they're doing this monthly fraud update. Is kind of like the basic of the webinar. And so one of the things they did on the registration page is, it wasn't when you go through and you go to click to register for the January fraud update webinar, they actually have the next 3 fraud webinar dates on there, but you could actually register for the next couple of months worth. And so that way you're kind of locking people into your marketing funnel. And I thought that was like a really great little small hack to just like, hey, if you're interested in this one, you're probably going to be interested in the rest of them. So let's just get them on the calendar now between now and April. And then I know I've got your eyeballs for the next 4 months on the marketing side.
Love that.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, so we talked about acquire, activate, and then you said acceleration is the third step. How would you quickly describe that third part of this process?
Yeah, so acceleration is really broken up into 3 things. One is about having the team in place, and particularly, when you're thinking about marketing, a lot of the time, I don't think is rocket science, but it usually, there's a lot of stuff to do and it takes a lot of time. So really having the right structure, that you have someone that can plan out a strategy with you. So you kind of know what needs to happen over the next 90 days, but then you have the man hours to execute on it, because a lot of the stuff, like I say, isn't rocket science. There's a load of graduates coming through that love social media. At the end of the day, they're probably better online than you are. So having my favorite structure is to have one person senior and then managing like a team of juniors that can execute on it. So 1 is having the right team. 2 is having the right strategy, what I call a growth engine. And that's really knowing exactly what you need to do week on week. So you're not second guessing yourself. You're not wasting time, kind of doing stuff which is not directly impacting on your metrics. And then 3rd is the process of high tempo testing, which is what I was just talking about a few minutes ago, but, having that backlog of experiments and running through those experiments. If you're doing those things, you really will find yourself accelerating versus the competition.
Cool. That's a great framework, the acquire, activate, acceleration. So, man, we've covered a ton of ground, and I'm so appreciative of your time. I know that it's late where you are. It's getting later, and you probably want to get on to your dinner, and it's probably close to 7 o'clock at this point. So I wanted to kind of turn over to you and ask you, first of all, I've mentioned this growth toolkit that's available on your website, howardkingston.com. Is there any other last final parting words, or how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about learning from you and the work that you're doing?
No, it's all good. Come to howardkingston.com, and there's a link there on my website, but you can download my growth toolkit, which has all the best tools, marketing tools I'm using at the moment. But also my academy website is growthvelocity.academy, growthvelocity.academy, and we do a load of in-person digital marketing, growth hacking, and online programs as well. So yeah, so just drop me an email, and love to hear from you.
Is that what brought you to Dubai? You were in Dubai not long ago.
Yeah, so I do, like, I'm flying to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia day after tomorrow. So I do tons of growth hacking and marketing workshops across the Middle East as well. It's just like people are going crazy for it. And they're so hot on social media over there. It's like, it's nuts. It's quite a different market than UK and than America, actually. You know, Instagram rules over there. But yeah, it's just really cool. I think that market is really booming at the moment.
Yeah, dude, that's so epic that you're doing these workshops in the Middle East. That's and that you're doing them both in person as well as, you know, the online stuff that you're doing. So again, Howard, thank you so much for the time and the expertise here. It's tons of great stuff here to help our audience fill the top of the funnel and do it the right way, because like money is money, but time is the most important currency that these teams have. So being able to do this stuff the right way is just so critical, because they don't, 6 months from now, if they don't do it right, it could be too late. So thanks for sharing your expertise, man. It's been really good having you here on the show.
Real pleasure, dude.
All right, dude. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Yeah. All right. That is my conversation with Howard Kingston. Just looking at my notes here that I jotted down while we talked, a couple of key takeaways for me is, number one, you know, it's always a great reminder that regardless of whatever campaign you're running, whether it's a marketing campaign, a sales campaign, whatever that campaign is, make sure that you've got really real clarity around the objectives. What are the metrics? How do we know whether or not we're successful with that campaign? Because there's lots of shiny red balls out there, lots of things you could be doing on the marketing side that make you feel like you're getting the word out. But if those activities aren't generating the outcomes that you need, then the activities are not important activities. The second thing that really struck home with me is the focus on a niche and just getting really clear. I really appreciated Howard sharing the importance of getting clear on your target buyer with your target companies, because like I've said this a lot to our clients and people that come to our workshops, like you've got this unique luxury as a startup, right? So whether you're at your first couple of customers, like you only need to get the next 10. If you got 10 customers, you only got to get to 100. If you got 100, okay, you only got to get to 1,000. It's a little bit more, but still you don't have to sell to the whole world. And the best way to prove success is to get really clear and solve one problem really well for one target audience, one target buyer, one target niche. So always hearing that is a really strong reminder of how important it is for us to really focus in. A couple other key concepts that I really liked is this idea of channel bias, and it made me realize that maybe I've got this channel bias myself because I do this podcast and I do LinkedIn stuff, but there's other stuff I'm not doing that maybe I should think about. Or maybe there's certain things I should stop doing on LinkedIn that aren't working and I just like to do them. So that was really key takeaway. And then the last piece, the framework that he shared in the latter half of our conversation around acquire predictably, activate your leads, and then have this acceleration process. Just I like the 3 steps of acquire, activate, accelerate, so that you can get really clear about how your program is working and what you need to be doing to set those up the right way. So again, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. If you could head over to iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast, leave a review, let other people know about it, tell a friend or 10. The very best way for us to get the word out, just like we try to do marketing and promotion of these podcasts through all these different channels. Frankly, the best way for us, and probably the way that you may have learned about this podcast, is through a friend, somebody that recommended it to you. And so if you could recommend this podcast to a friend or 10 that you know would get some value out of the content that we're bringing to you, I'd really appreciate it. Love to see the downloads go up. Love to see the subscriptions go up every single month. So that's our metric to know that we're bringing you really great content here. So that's it for now. Thanks so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci, and we'll see you in the next episode very soon. Take care. Bye.